Hi, everyone. Welcome in. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Happy Wednesday. I hope everyone is having a great week so far. I'll let a couple of minutes for a couple of people to come in last minute, but my name is Ashley Wirtz, and I am the Future City Middle School Program Manager. I am joined by Maddie Farraco, the High School Program Manager, and we are so excited to welcome you all to the 2025-2026 Future City Annual Theme Webinar. We hope that after this webinar, you have some ideas and tools needed to tackle this year's competition. This year's theme is Farm to Table, where teams will design a city that eliminates food waste from farm to table while keeping their citizens healthy and safe. So I'm just going to start with a couple of housekeeping items on this next slide. This session will be recorded and uploaded into both the high school and the middle school Future City dashboards next week. Please use the Q&A panel for any questions that you have, and the questions will be held until the end of the webinar after each presenter has finished speaking. We do ask that you keep your questions focused on this year's theme, but if you do have any questions regarding the Future City program or competition, please email those questions to futurecity@discovere.org. Today's webinar will be hosted by Discover E board member Rick Guerra, and you'll hear from three wonderful expert panelists who will present on real-world topics that are focused on this year's theme, Farm to Table. And so with that being said, I'll hand it over to Maddie to talk a little bit about Discover E.
Thanks, Ashley. Hello, everyone. So before jumping into our presentations, we just want to share a little bit more about Discover E, the organization behind the Future City competition. Discover E is a nonprofit organization that promotes engineering education and awareness. It aims to inspire students to pursue careers in engineering and technology by providing resources and running several different initiatives. Discover E collaborates with educators, engineers, and volunteers to encourage that next generation of innovators by offering hands-on learning experiences and competitions such as the Future City competition. You can go to the next one, Ashley. Thank you. Additional programs that Discover E offers are Chats with Changemakers, National Engineers Week, Introduce a Girl to Engineering Day or Girl Day, of course, the Future City competition, and the World Engineering Day. Discover E also offers numerous free resources. We have over 200 STEM activities that you can use in and outside of your classroom, a few of which even have challenge videos where two student hosts dive into these activities so you can follow along with them as you do the activity. We have a full engineering careers page that goes into different disciplines of engineering, and we have free downloadable posters and graphics that you can put up in your classroom or your workspace. We also have a really great opportunity in our outreach grants for anyone involved in eWeek or Girl Day events at your organization. So we really encourage you to check out these free resources that are available on our website, discovere.org. And then we also want to extend a really big thank you to Discover E's visionary and leader sponsors who really make Discover E's resources and programming a possibility for everybody. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Ashley to introduce our panelists and host.
Great. So let's meet your expert panelists for today's theme webinar. Our first speaker is Lori Duncan, Associate Professor of Biosystems Engineering and Agricultural Sustainability Specialist at the University of Tennessee. Our second speaker is Jose Lopez, Biofeedstock Researcher at Shell USA. And then our third speaker is Jimmy Eny, Packaging Research and Development Manager in Dairy Foods at Land O'Lakes. And finally, let me introduce you to our host for today's webinar, Rick Guerra. Rick is the former Chief Executive Officer and current Senior Advisor of Guerra Engineering and a Discover E board member, a licensed professional engineer in Texas and California. Rick has over 3 decades of leadership and advocacy in engineering profession. He has served as president of both the Texas Society of Professional Engineers and the National Society of Professional Engineers, and was named an NSPE Fellow in 2018. A proud Longhorn, Rick holds bachelor and master's degrees in mechanical engineering from the University of Texas at Austin. So I'm going to hand it over to Rick to introduce our first speaker.
Thank you, Ashley. First, let me say how excited I am to be here with you today. This is a fantastic program, and I'm so excited about what's about to happen. One of the things that's not listed on this bio is why I'm a board member at Discovery. I'll tell you that I recently retired after a 43-year career as an engineer, and it was one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done. I've loved it from the very beginning, and all along the way, I was always anxious to tell other people about this and help other people get into this career. Unfortunately, in our world today, that's not always the case. Not everybody is exposed to engineering. They're not as lucky as me to grow up with a father who was an engineer. So I lived it when I was a kid. But for most people, that's not the case. And what Discovery does to introduce kids to engineering and give them a taste of what it's like is an incredible opportunity. I'm so excited about it. And I'm really excited to give you a taste of what I love today in this presentation. As Ashley mentioned, we've got three incredible expert panelists that are going to talk to you today about their life and what they do to help in this theme. So why don't we kick that off and get started? First up is Lori Duncan. Lori is an associate professor of biosystems engineering and the agricultural sustainability specialist at University of Tennessee. She develops and leads applied research and educational programs focused on sustainable cropping systems and the effective use of technology. An active member of the American Society of Agricultural and Biological Engineers for 17 years, Lori works with a diverse range of partners, from growers and agribusinesses to national organizations and government officials, to promote the adoption of sustainable management practices. She holds a Bachelor of Science, a Master of Science, and a PhD in Biosystems Engineering from the University of Tennessee. So, Lori, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Rick. Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here today to talk with you all about something that I'm really passionate about, which is the future of farming. So I want to share a bit about how I ended up in engineering and some innovations that are completely changing how we think about food. Will you advance to the next slide? Thanks. So a little bit about me. When I was growing up, I had no idea what engineering was. I grew up on a beef cattle farm in East Tennessee. I loved science and math. I was passionate about the environment, and I had a strong appreciation for agriculture, but I wasn't sure what career path was right for me. I eventually found my way to biosystems engineering, and it turned out to be the perfect fit because it's all about using engineering principles to solve problems related to living things like plants and animals and the environment. So I started with a bachelor's degree, and then for my master's degree, I focused on studying hormones and dairy waste. You can see me in a dairy lagoon in the top right corner. It probably looks a little gross, sounds a little gross, it was a little gross, but it's a really important part of making sure our farms are environmentally friendly. For my PhD, I used drones and remote sensing to study row crops from up above. So it was like giving myself a bird's eye view to check on the health of a whole field all at one time. So my career's been dedicated to using technologies to make farming sustainable. Can you go to the next slide? And today, I'm an associate professor and crop sustainability specialist. So that means I don't just teach students and do research. I have a third very unique job called extension. And I wanted to describe this a little bit because not everybody's familiar. Our public universities quite literally extend research-based information and teach it to the public. So we get to know the communities, find out what their real problems are, and take that knowledge back to the university to find solutions. So here's a pro tip for you. You definitely have extension in your state. Every single state in the United States has extension, and you most likely have it in your own county or region. So try to find them and reach out to them for the ag production section of this design. They have tons of expertise and they'll be more than happy to work with you. Next slide, please. I'd be remiss to not mention the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. So this challenge that y'all have directly addresses SDG 12, responsible consumption and production. So to produce and consume responsibly, we're going to have to rethink our current structure of food systems that we have right now. So right now, we live in a take, make, waste world. So this is called a linear economy. It means we dig up a natural resource, like oil for plastic. We make a product, like a water bottle, and then when we're done with it, we just throw it in the trash. The problem is that we quickly use up all of our resources and we create a lot of waste. So let's imagine a circle instead of a straight line. In a circular economy, we don't throw things away. We design systems where nothing's wasted. So waste from one thing becomes a valuable input for another thing. So here's a simple example. We grow and eat vegetables. We save the scraps. We compost those scraps or let them break down naturally. That compost is full of nutrients and it becomes fertilizer for new vegetables or even for feed for livestock. The livestock will then create manure, which then we can use to fertilize the vegetables again. So this means we're constantly reusing resources, minimizing what we have to buy new, and creating a super efficient system where everything is utilized. So we just talked about one basic circle, but a real life sustainable city needs a giant network of circles, and we call it a system of systems. So the circular economy is more complicated than just one compost pile. Think of it like a giant set of interlocking gears on a massive machine. The compost cycle is one gear, but what about all the other gears that touch it? So what if a local factory has hot leftover steam that could be used to heat a nearby greenhouse? Or what if the cardboard boxes that deliver the vegetables could be shredded and used as bedding for livestock? We have to design these systems that use every single byproduct, not just the food scraps. That's why it gets so complex. A true circular city needs engineers to design not one, but dozens of these systems that all share and trade resources. Advanced slide, please. Thank you. This image here is meant to show the difference between the old way of farming, or linear production, on your left, and the new circular way on your right. So in the linear system, they're keeping the animals and the crops totally separate. They're trying to grow as much as possible, even if it harms the entire system. They rely on standard power from the electric grid. They're using a lot of fertilizer, which is expensive and it pollutes the environment. The water and nutrients run off the farm. You can see this drainage pipe and drain away where they can cause pollution. Conversely, on the right side, we have a circular production system, and it looks very similar to the left, but there's some key differences here. They're using wind turbines and other renewable energy sources. They're using precision agriculture or smart technology that only puts fertilizer exactly where the plants need it. They're catching and storing their drained water and nutrients and then reusing them. So the circular system on the right is all about closing the loop to save energy and recycle every possible nutrient. Next slide, please. We've been talking about making farming smarter out in the big open fields, which is something you may want to include in your design. But now let's bring it into city limits. As more and more people move to cities, it just doesn't make sense to truck food hundreds of miles. So we're finding ways to grow food right where people live. This is called urban agriculture. The coolest part is that it minimizes two huge problems. One is transportation. So growing food locally cuts down on the energy and cost of shipping across the country. And two is jobs. It brings the important job of food production back into the city. If you look at this figure, you can see all the different ways we can do urban farming. At home, so maybe you have just a simple garden at your home or at your school in your community. On buildings, so we're now using every available space. We can use the walls, we can create green roofs, we can make greenhouses on top of the roof, and we can grow food inside buildings. So this includes amazing ideas like vertical farming and aquaponics. I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into those two high-tech ideas because I think they could be part of your farm-to-table design. So imagine a farm, but instead of the crops spreading out across a huge flat field, the plants are stacked on top of each other. So that's the basic idea of vertical farming. It's about growing food up instead of out. So why do we want to grow up? Well, obviously it uses less space, so a smaller footprint. It uses less water than a traditional farm because it's a closed system. So it actually can use up to 95% less water. There's no weather problems, so they're grown indoors. They're safe from droughts, floods, storms, freezing temperatures. They can grow strawberries in the middle of winter or lettuce during a hurricane. It's 24/7 all year long. So it works because these urban farmers can control everything the plant needs. They use LED lights that the plant needs for photosynthesis. Most of them don't use soil. They hold their roots in place with something like a foam, and they get all their food from the water. The temperature and humidity and even the amount of CO2 is perfectly set for the plants to grow as fast and healthy as possible. And then since the farm's indoors and sealed off, that gets rid of a major challenge of outdoor agriculture, which is pests and weeds. So today, vertical farms are growing leafy greens like lettuce and spinach. They're starting to grow small fruits like strawberries and small vegetables like tomatoes and peppers. So I think vertical farming can be a key part of your design because it's going to help you be more resilient by growing locally year-round and obviously with very little waste. And this slide is showing something called aquaponics. So it's a super efficient system that grows plants and raises fish together in a closed loop. So it works like a three-part team. The fish live in a tank. They create waste or poop, which is toxic to them. If you've ever had a fish tank, you know you got to filter it out, right? So then this bacteria can be converted into nitrates. That water with the nitrates is then pumped into this tank with vegetables or leafy greens. The plants need nitrates to grow. So these nitrates go through their roots, and this acts like a natural water filter before sending the clean water back into the fish tank. So the result you get is two crops, the fish and the veggies, and you're saving a huge amount of water, all without needing soil or a chemical fertilizer. It's a pretty amazing system. Next slide, please. I think I'm running up on time. I just want to mention, as you're thinking about your projects, that we have to think and consider a few important things. One is space. So how can you grow the most food in the space you have? Power. So how are you going to power your food systems? People. So who's involved? Because you've got growing, harvesting, distributing, as the next panelist will say. And then climate. How is your city's food system going to handle the changes in climate, like extreme weather? If you consider those in your design, you'll be creating the most resilient city possible. And that's it for me. I'm really excited to see all your innovative ideas you all create. And just remember, engineering is solving real world problems. So think big and be really creative. And best of luck to all of you.
Thank you, Lori. That was fantastic. I want to remind everybody to use the Q&A to list any questions as you're listening to the speaker speak. If anything comes to mind, things you want to know, that if it has to do with what they're talking about or how you would incorporate those ideas into your projects, please put those questions in the Q&A and we'll get to them when we've heard from our last speaker. The next speaker is Jose Lopez. Jose is a research scientist in Shell's USA Biofuels Research and Development Program, where they focus on developing sustainable feedstock options to support advanced biofuels, chemicals, and natural carbon sinks globally. With a PhD in agronomy and extensive experience in both industry and academia, he's an expert in biofuels, crop physiology, breeding and genetics, and quantitative research methods. He's a member of a worldwide multidisciplinary cross-institutional research team skilled at integrating genomic imaging, and remote sensing data to drive innovative solutions for sustainable energy. Jose?
Thank you. Very, very nice to talk to you guys about a little bit of how a few different technologies that you can also think of when you're designing your city. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to make fuel from waste. So if you can go to the next slide. So this is what I'm going to try to cover briefly. Is basically a little bit about my background. Then I'm going to show you a video of one of the technologies that I'm going to present to you. And then I'm going to just show you a list of different technologies that show you how you can take different types of waste from farm to table to actually produce energy, which is what we do where I work. And then I'm going to give you, as a closing in the summary at the end, a little cheat sheet where you can hopefully match what waste you have to what technology you can use. And so this is a little bit about me. So if you can just start advancing. So I'm originally from Bolivia. Me and my wife are from there. I then went to Honduras to get my degree in engineering in food science and technology. I got my PhD at University of Florida. Then I went to Dartmouth College to study agriculture using mathematical models. After that, I went to the University of Minnesota and then to work on breeding. And then I finally joined Shell, and I finally thought better to get to warmer weather. And now I live in Texas. So that's me in a nutshell. If you can go to the next one. So this is the video. Hopefully you guys can learn a little bit about the options that exist. Sound is not working on my end.
No, I don't mean they hand them keys. They're
Are you able to hear now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Starting now.
Hey, I've got something amazing to tell you. Shell is using cows to drive trucks. No, I don't mean they hand them keys. Their manure is energy. It's used to make RNG, renewable natural gas. Farmers know it. Like Greg, he's telling everyone.
We're excited to be partnered with Shell on this RNG project. We produce a lot of manure at our dairy, and we're going to turn it into renewable natural gas. How cool is that?
Believe it or not, just the one cow can make enough renewable natural gas in a year to drive a truck over 1,200 miles. And that's getting truckers excited too. They're like,
mile for mile, it is cheaper than diesel. And it significantly reduces life cycle greenhouse gas emissions.
so what exactly is renewable natural gas? Well, organic waste like manure or even food waste is collected up. Then it's put inside a digester. Or as my scientist friend Anna likes to call it,
a giant mechanical stomach. Here's a really small version. Inside, millions of microorganisms are feasting their way through the organic waste. As they eat, they produce gas, which is filtered and collected here to make pure natural gas.
And what's really cool is that it's just like the natural gas that comes out of your pipes at home, except this stuff comes from cows. You see, Shell is investing in all kinds of alternative energy sources. And now they're busy building renewable natural gas facilities, like the one in Oregon.
We make enough renewable natural gas in 1 year to drive a truck from San Francisco to New York City over 10,000 times.
That's pretty cool, eh? So let's be clear. Converting to cleaner burning energy is a smart choice. From production to combustion, RNG prevents emissions from organic waste, and it's an alternative fuel from Shell that's right here and now. And as for refueling, it's like any other truck. Pull up, hook up, fill up. And that C in the logo, that stands for compressed renewable natural gas. There's enough in the tanks on that baby to drive over 600 miles using proven, reliable technology. Shell is putting waste to work while lowering costs and emissions. Now that sounds like powering progress to me.
To learn more, just reach out to the RNG team.
If we can go to the next slide now. Sorry for all of the advertisement, but that's essentially a nice video that I like because I think it does a reasonable job explaining one of the different technologies that I'm gonna be showing you today, and I think that it makes a good point on how best to take advantage of this. So basically, I'm gonna present to you with a bunch of different technologies that maybe you can include in your design. Some of them in the left are the ones that are already commercially available, and the ones on the right are new things that are perhaps coming in the future. And so if you can start with the next slide. So the next slide, so it's HEFA. HEFA stands for hydrogenated esters and fatty acids. And it's essentially a technology that takes in oils and converts them into diesel or sustainable aviation fuel. So one thing that it's fun about oils is that they have about the same number of carbons in their molecule. And this happens to be something important in energy, how many carbons you have in your molecule. And so the molecule of carbon in the oil is about the same size as the size of the fuel that is used in airplanes or the diesel that is used in trucks. So this HEFA process can basically take in vegetable oil, but it can take waste oils or waste fats. For example, after you finish frying in McDonald's, right, you have some waste oils, and that could go through this process in order to become aviation fuel. So if we're going to go to the next slide. So the next one is renewable natural gas that we already talked about, where you can put in the cow manure, but you can also use food waste or agricultural residues. And then again, you can produce renewable natural gas out of it, and then you can use that to drive a truck or to power a plant or something like that. Next slide, please. Then another one that is very widely available, for example, in the US, believe it or not, like 40% of the corn produced in the US goes to the production of ethanol through fermentation. And in other places, and even in the US, you can also use sugarcane to produce sugars in order to do this fermentation. So fermentation is the process where you essentially take in sugars, you put them in contact with a microorganism, a yeast generally, that will convert that sugar into alcohol. And that alcohol is also called ethanol, and that can be used, that can be mixed with gasoline and then be used in the car engine. So in the US, it's very common that you will be charging 90% fossil fuel gasoline and then 10% ethanol gasoline. And so that's so that's the next technology that I just wanted to highlight to you guys. Now, alcohol to jet. So now we're coming into the realm of the newer things that you can potentially do. So interestingly, so there are a lot of ways that you can produce alcohols. And then the idea of this technology is that maybe you can take the thing I mentioned about this number of carbons that you have in a molecule being important into what can you power with it, right? So if you have a 16, 18 carbons, then you have a long chain of carbons, so you can power something stronger. You can power like a truck or an airplane, right? If you have a shorter carbon chain, then maybe, and you want to convert it into a larger carbon chain, then maybe you can put that through this process of alcohol to jet, where you're going to take this alcohol molecule that has 2 carbons and convert it into a 16 or 18 carbon molecule. And that would be, if you're going to go to the next one. So another process that is interesting is this waste to jet, where you essentially take whatever waste that you have, for example, like forestry residues or the cuttings after you finish mowing your garden, or maybe after you harvest the corn, there's a lot of stalks left there. So all of those technologies, you can potentially use this waste to jet process, where you first gasify whatever you have, and then you use a process to produce this thing called syngas, and then you can get a bunch of different chemicals, including natural gas and diesel and aviation fuel out of it. And then the last technology, no, I think that we have 2 more. Okay, so shell fiber conversion technology is essentially another technology that you can use to basically produce, take in wastes that are, for example, after you ferment the corn, that's something very common in the US. Maybe you have a little bit of residue out of that cannot be fermented with any other technology, right? So then there's this interesting technology that can take that residue that has carbohydrates or sugars that cannot be accessed easily, and then you can break that down, and then after you break it down, then you can generate even more ethanol. And this I think looks a little bit like the system from the previous panelists, because this slide elaborates a little more on what you can do with all of the byproducts. So you have your corn that produces your first generation ethanol. You can get then your residue. You can use this technology to get even more ethanol out of it. And then out of that, you get a very high protein feed that you can perhaps use to feed cows or fish or whatever you need to feed. And one interesting thing is you also get some extra oil out of the corn when you use this technology. And because we already learned that oils have an interesting number of carbon molecules, then that can go to then renewable diesel or sustainable aviation fuel. And if we can go to the next one. And the final technology that I just wanted to show out is called IH², which is a process where you just burn things in a very specific way so that you can produce a bunch of different products and chemicals that can be leveraged for different things. And this is called essentially, you can use essentially the same biomass for what's left, the stalks left after harvesting your corn, or or you can the wood chippings that come out of a sawmill, for example, or things like that. And if you can go to the last slide, please. And that's the last slide, where that's basically your cheat sheet there, where you have, okay, so let's say you have sugarcane, and then, that can go to an ethanol plant, and you can produce ethanol out of it. Maybe if you have oils that come from seeds, you can take that to the HEFA plant to produce those oils. Or that same thing works if you have waste oil or waste fats. For example, waste fats is what's in a slaughterhouse, what's left, the fat that's left, maybe that can go to the HEFA plant. Then if you have organic waste, like, for example, restaurant leftovers or the cow manure, that can go to the RNG plant to produce renewable natural gas. And then if you have this cellulosic waste that I was talking about, like the one from the corn after fermentation, then you can use these new technologies to produce different types of advanced fuels. And that's essentially what I had for you guys. Thank you.
Very, very interesting. And I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions about your topics that you spoke about. Our next speaker is Jimmy Eney. Jimmy is the Packaging Research and Development Manager for the Dairy Foods Division of Land O'Lakes Incorporated, based in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. He has over a decade of experience in packaging design and development for Land O'Lakes, and holds a packaging science degree from the University of Wisconsin, Stout. I'll turn it over to Jimmy.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, Rick. Yeah, so I get the opportunity to talk to you all a little bit about food packaging design. So I'm going to do just a really high level food packaging 101 for you all, so that we can start to get you thinking a little bit like a packaging engineer as you're getting towards the end of that farm to table design system, thinking about, okay, how do we get these sustainably produced products to the consumers where they will be consumed? Go next slide. Yeah, so just a little agenda. I'll give you a little intro about myself. I want to spend some time talking about the basic functions of a package, talking about the different levels of packaging that you'll want to consider. Then we'll dive a little bit into sustainability considerations, and I'll give you a brief highlight over some common materials that you can think about utilizing in your end-to-end system, and then we'll conclude. So yeah, just a little bit more about me. I live in the Twin Cities of Minnesota. Been working here at Land O'Lakes for over 10 years now. Started as a packaging engineer on our team. I now manage the team, so packaging engineer by trade. And I got my degree from University of Wisconsin Stout in packaging sciences. So go Blue Devils. And as I mentioned, I manage our dairy foods packaging team. So before I get into things, I do just want to make a quick plug as well for packaging engineering as a career field. Given that this is a group of individuals that are interested in engineering, I didn't know anything about packaging engineering as a career or opportunity as I was growing up. Didn't learn about it until I got into college and ended up having to transfer into the program. But I do just want to highlight it's a really great career field to get into. There's a very strong demand generally for packaging engineers. So if as you're listening to this, if it is interesting to you in any way, or even the concept of having the opportunity to eliminate waste with better new innovative packaging designs, then definitely implore you to look into it more as an opportunity. Okay, so and just so you know, Ashley, I think is running the slides. I do have builds on this slide, so you'll have to click through to get those builds to come up. But okay, first I just want to again try to get you all thinking a little bit about packaging engineering, or get you thinking like a packaging engineer, so that way you know, okay, what do we need our packaging to do? So to do that, I just want to highlight the key functions of a package, and there are generally 5 of them that we talk about, and they're contain, protect, communicate, perform, and then more and more circularity. And so that first function, and actually, yeah, perfect, thank you. That first one is going to be contain. So that is the most basic function of a package. You don't have a package if you're not containing something. So that's a very basic principle. The next thing is protection. So with food packaging specifically, you want to protect that food from damage, from spoilage, and from tampering. And then from there, we get into communicate. And that's, your package is generally your billboard for your product to communicate essential information to your consumer about the product, and to educate them on, everything they need to know about that product. The next function is to perform. So we think about this as how is that package providing additional value to how you're interacting with or consuming that product. So you don't want it to just be a necessary thing. You want it to really be a value added feature of that product. And then the last, but maybe most important consideration is circularity. So how, once we're done with that package, or once it's done with its first use, how can we get that back into that circular economy through recyclability, reuse, and or reducing our overall usage of it. So I'll quick highlight this picture that I have here. It's kind of a simple image of some sardine packaging, which might not be super exciting, but why I liked it is it's kind of doing all of those things. I think we can look at that and we can say, okay, what is that sardine package doing? It's containing the sardines, it's protecting it from damage and from spoilage, it's communicating information about what it is. It's performing in that it does have an easy open tab on it, which you wouldn't necessarily need. You could expect your consumer to have a can opener at home, but there's that kind of added feature of that easy open tab. And then there's a circularity component. So rigid metal tin packaging, generally pretty highly recyclable in most municipalities. So we've got the circularity covered there as well. And we can go to the next slide. Okay, next I want to talk about the different levels of packaging. As I'm guessing that's not, again, something that most people think about too much. Most often you're going to be associating packaging with that primary packaging level. So the primary package, that is the component that's containing that item. It's doing that most basic function of a package. That's most often what you're going to be interacting with as a consumer. And a lot of times that might even be what's showing up on the store shelf. From there, we get into secondary packaging. And so secondary packaging, that's something that's going to give that package a little bit more protection. It's going to give it a little bit more shape. It's going to provide some more containment. And that's generally going to be where you're communicating all that essential information to the customer. It might even be bundling multiple units together. And then the last level of packaging is going to be your tertiary packaging. And that's what enables you to get bulk quantities of your items to the consumer, to the store, to wherever it's being used in an efficient manner. So without that tertiary packaging level, you'd be unable to efficiently move these products from one place to another. So I've got these examples of those 3 levels on the side here. Of course, I've got the Land O'Lakes example on the right, and then I have just a little bit more generic cereal example there in the middle. But as we see at the top there, that primary packaging level for your cereal example, that's going to be that internal bag or pouch that's containing the cereal. For our butter, it's going to be that wrap that's right around the butter itself. Secondary packaging for cereal, that's going to be the box itself. That again, it's giving that shape, that pouch a little bit more shape. It's giving you a billboard. For our butter example, it's containing our sticks and it's communicating the product benefits as well. And then at the bottom there, we've got a tertiary packaging. So, maybe probably the most boring aspect of it, but it's so essential in enabling those efficiencies, those economies of scale. And so it's important to be thinking about all these levels of packaging because you're going to need each of these to get your item distributed effectively and safely. And so you'll want to have design considerations for circularity with each of them. We can go to the next slide. So sustainability, circularity. I think the main thing I want to say here is just to highlight that food packaging is a sustainability enabler for food systems. And why that is because packaging is what enables us to extend the shelf life of what otherwise is often the case highly perishable items, meaning that there's a lot longer time for those products to be distributed and consumed before they expire and become unsafe to consume. And also packaging, it enables us to produce food in concentrated areas where we can most efficiently create that food, grow it and produce it and package it, and then move it into population centers. So why I think this is important to highlight is because it'd be really easy to just look at packaging and the physical waste that it creates and say, how do we eliminate packaging? And there's definitely a place for that, but I would challenge you to think a little bit more beyond that and say, okay, if we want our packaging to be sustainable, how do we work within this framework of it's doing this essential function of allowing us to distribute food in a more efficient, more sustainable manner? So now how do we look at those components themselves to make them more circular? That gets into some of the other points here around. I just want to highlight, plastic materials. I think we can all understand some of the challenges that come with waste from plastic packaging. And why plastics are so prevalent when we think about packaging in general, but specifically food packaging, is because they are incredibly versatile and economical to produce. And they are really great material at providing essential barrier properties to food packaging. And so they are really good at doing that shelf life extension portion. Now, the downside with plastics, which I think most will understand, is that they are very environmentally resilient. So what makes them great as a packaging material makes them problematic once it's done serving that packaging purpose, in that it doesn't degrade in the environment. If it's not properly disposed of and recycled, then it starts to accumulate in the environment. And so I think really the challenge to think about is how can you create packaging structures and systems that are equally efficient. They're doing that containment and protection and extending shelf lives, but also that have the end of life as we talk about considerations of, okay, after it's been used in that primary instance, how can we think about giving that new life afterwards or incorporating that back into the circular economy? And so, again, for packaging that can take different forms as far as being produced from renewable resources or biodegradable material, maybe going back into maybe getting composted after use and going back into the soil that's going to be used to grow food, or maybe it's something that retains all of its usefulness and purpose and it gets reused in an efficient manner. We can go to the next slide. And then lastly, I just wanted to highlight some common packaging materials and give you some high level pros and cons of them as you're thinking about, how do we kind of bring these pieces of the puzzle together to create packaging for our food distribution ecosystem. So go through these kind of quick in the interest of time, but the first one is paper, very common packaging material. The pros are that it's highly recyclable, generally low cost, very renewable. Some of the downsides to paper is that it generally doesn't have a good food barrier or a good barrier to the things that will spoil food without being maybe married up with some kind of a plastic component. So that's the downside there. Paper is also pretty energy and water intensive in its production. Then we get to plastics. We've talked about that quite a bit, but the pros there is that it has very high barrier properties when it comes to what we need to protect from for food preservation. It's generally quite low cost to produce. It's a lightweight material. So all of those things make it really great for packaging. The downsides to that is that it's challenging to sort and recycle plastics because there are many different types. And so you have to get all of those different types of plastic segregated properly in order to be able to recycle them effectively. And then there's the environmental concerns that come with that material when it's not disposed of properly. Another material is metal. So that's another common packaging material. Think of steel cans, metal cans of canned goods. Think about all of your soda cans that are made up of aluminum. So pros to that, like plastic, it's an excellent barrier for food preservation, and it is highly recyclable. One of the most well recycled materials when you have a good clean source of it. Some cons to that are that it's a little bit higher cost than alternatives, and it can be heavy, which does impact the distribution of your materials. The heavier it is, the more costly it is to distribute. And then the last one here I have is glass. So glass, it's a really excellent barrier for food preservation. It's highly recyclable, probably the most widely recycled plastic or packaging material in use. And it's easily reusable. I'm sure we all have, maybe like glass mason jars at home or even glass packaging that you've held on to and reuse in another fashion. So it's very easily reused, very easily sanitized after its initial use. Downsides to glass is that higher cost than a lot of the other alternatives here. It's heavy, so again, like transportation can be a challenge, and it's fragile. And especially when we're talking about food systems and food packaging, that fragility and the opportunity for it to break can be problematic for food production systems. So there's my really brief, quick packaging 101 to give you all something to think about again as you're trying to incorporate circular packaging systems into your future city. And I think that's all I've got. If you want to advance, Ashley. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Jimmy. That was fantastic. We're into the Q&A session now. If you've got any more questions, there's still a few minutes to put some more questions into the Q&A. But I'm going to start with a general question to all of the panelists. You guys are obviously in the cutting edge of each of your technologies, your places in the world. But it's sometimes hard for us to think about the future, especially 100 years into the future. And these projects that the kids are going to be working on, these future cities, are meant to be 100 years in the future. So I want to go back to each of you and talk to you about the technologies. You all mentioned current thinking and then maybe even some future thinking. But I want to ask you individually about your areas of expertise. What do you see as the cutting edge today, and what are the ideas that you're hearing about the future that they may want to think about? in terms of your, whether it's packaging or farming, agriculture, or energy sources? What are some of the things that you see that are at the forefront now and coming in the future? Maybe we start with, because she hasn't spoken in a while, why don't we go back to Lori?
All right, I'd love to start. While Jose and Jimmy were talking, I kept thinking, like, where's our system boundary, right? Are we saying we're a city on an island way out and we have no other way to talk with other people and to trade and all of those things? So I think that that's going to influence a lot of my answers here because that's what's going through my brain. But I think that right now for agricultural production, automation is a big thing. So we now have tractors that have they don't have a cab. There's no way to steer the tractor. It drives itself. And then we're right on the forefront of having fleets of robots that can go and do weeding and spraying and all of those things that we typically see large scale expensive machinery do. So I would expect in 100 years, we're going to be way ahead of that. But I think that helps us really optimize those efficiencies. And that's the reason we're kind of headed towards that automation. And it's interesting to think back to, like, a lot of people with agriculture think of, super old tractors that your grandfather or great grandfather had. And now we're to the point where we don't even have a steering wheel on the tractor. So who knows in 100 years where we're going to be.
Jimmy, how about you? What's the future of packaging?
Yeah. So to talk a little bit about what's on the cutting edge right now, a lot of it in packaging is related to how do we make our materials more sustainable and how do we get them to be enablers of the circular economy. And so one of the biggest technologies I see as being on the forefront of that right now is advanced recycling or chemical recycling, we would call it. So I talked a lot about, plastics and why they're a great material for packaging, but they're problematic for the environment. Well, advanced recycling is a process, and I'm suspecting Jose might know a bit about this and be able to speak to it as well. But it's a process where you can take all different types of plastics, really of any type or form, and in a nutshell, you put it through a process in where chemically you are breaking down that plastic into its very basic chemical building blocks. You're depolymerizing the plastic and then putting that through successive processes where you repolymerize it and you can make either new plastic materials or different fuels and different chemicals, as a lot of those processes that Jose outlined do. And that's about as deep as I'm going to try to explain it. So that's a really promising thing, because if I try to project and say, wow, wouldn't it be great if we had closed loop recycling systems and we could still use these plastic materials that are really efficient when it comes to the manufacturing side and in keeping our food safe to consume and extending its shelf life, and then it can all go in one closed loop recycling system, and we can create new packaging right from that's safe and efficient and all those great things, and not have the waste problem. So that's kind of where we're on the forefront of right now. I think if we project 100 years into the future, I see technologies like that becoming more prevalent and more economical, and some of the kind of byproducts of those systems that are environmentally not great at the moment, kind of cleaning up those processes. And then I think it's just getting really super efficient with the materials that we are using. So that way we really just have very minimalistic packaging that's doing all those essential functions, but also designed from the beginning with the circular economy in mind. So that way there's a really defined end life or reuse opportunity with that material that is, net neutral for the environment.
Right. How about you, Jose? The future of energy, the future of fuels, where is that going?
That's great, and I really like that Jimmy mentioned the plastic reuse, because that's what I thought when I was looking at his slide and I was looking at that. It's very hard to to recycle, and it is, right? Especially the big part is how to get that separated from the rest of the stuff to actually get a clean thing that goes into a plant. So maybe that is something that is going to how we gather the waste is something that might be something that changes in the future, so that we can actually do some things better. Maybe artificial intelligence and robots are going to be able to go through our trash so that they become super that you actually take in only the stuff that you need for one process and for the other process, right? Because that's a little bit of a challenge there. Another idea, perhaps, that's a little bit more in the agricultural realm is like trying to grow or to use land that is currently not used, right? So that's there's some efforts, right? For example, like land that has been severely salinated because of excess of fertilizers, or maybe land that was used in mining. Maybe you can find some good plants that can economically grow there, and you can do some fuels out of them. So I guess maybe those are some ideas.
Here's a great follow-up. What are the byproducts of the chemical recycling process, and how can these byproducts be integrated into the circular economy?
That's a great question that honestly goes beyond the scope of my knowledge for that advanced recycling process. Again, I don't know if Jose can shed any light on that. But really, ideally with that closed loop system, you should get whatever amount of, plastics by, let's say, molecular weight are going in, you should get out. And generally, my understanding is that is how the process works. However, it's a lot of the energy that goes into it, and then some of the chemical byproducts that aren't, purely extracted from that process. And again, I am the furthest thing from an expert on that. I only know enough to be a little bit dangerous in speaking about it and how it might play a role in future recycling systems. But highly encourage anyone who wants to know more about that to look up some sources that they can find on the web to learn more about it.
Speaking of sources, that's one thing I know these students are going to be looking for. You guys all spoke about your areas of expertise and had some great input for the kids, but if they want to know more, can you cite a resource? Where would they go to find out more about what's up and coming in your area of expertise?
There's a great study that is published by I think it's the EPA, that it's called the Billion-Ton Study, that goes through all of these different approaches that you can use in order to produce more energy from different sources, including waste and residues, right? So I think that is an interesting source to get some ideas from.
Lori, any thoughts on agriculture?
Yes, trying to think of open access sources here, but the society that I'm a part of, the American Society of Ag and Biological Engineers, we have a lot of information about circular bioeconomies, and we actually have an institute now. So if you just Google agricultural circular bioeconomy, something like that, you should find a lot of information. Hopefully most that's open access. And then also, as I mentioned before, on the ag production side of things, reach out to your extension service in your state, whether that be in the county or at the land grant university. I know that they're more than willing to help.
Yeah, and for me, for packaging, I would direct everyone to go to check out the Sustainable Packaging Coalition website. So SPC, they are a packaging industry organization that its focus is on providing resources for industry experts on sustainable packaging design. It's all about creating centralized guidelines that packaging engineers and producers can develop to, so that way we can have more uniform processes, which helps enable sustainable, the circular economy and sustainability. So again, it's the Sustainable Packaging Coalition. The website is sustainablepackaging.org. They have a resources tab where they've got a bunch of different publicly accessible guidelines around, how to implement different sustainable packaging concepts and materials into your system.
Well, thank you. I see now that we're coming up on the hour. So I want to take this time to thank our panelists. Thank you for all your expertise and sharing with us today. Thank you to all the attendees for your attention. And we're all really looking forward to seeing what you come up with your future cities. Can't wait to see what you've learned and how you apply it. But with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Maddie to close us out.
Thank you so much, Rick. And I know we have a bunch of other questions in here. We did make a note of them, and we will ask the panelists if they're willing to answer these questions afterwards, and we'll get them out to you either within this slide deck or as an additional resource within your dashboard. But if any other theme or program questions do come up within you and your team, just reach out to us at futurecity@discovere.org. And let us know if you'd like to connect with any of our panelists today, and we can directly connect you to them. But thank you again, as Rick said, thank you to our amazing panelists, Lori, Jose, and Jimmy, for your expertise and your support. Thank you, Rick, for being a really great host. And thank you all for joining us. This recording, as we mentioned at the top of the call, will be uploaded to your Future City dashboard. And yeah, we can't wait to see the innovation and the creativity that you and your team will create within your cities. So good luck, everyone, and thank you so much for being here.
I think we can end it. Thank you so much, Rick.